Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar on strengthening food security. This conversation is the second conversation of a 5-part series hosted by the Clinton Foundation's Clinton Global Initiative. And the purpose of this series is really just to provide a platform for us to discuss the unique challenges and pressures that COVID-19 is presenting as the Caribbean region prepares for the upcoming hurricane season. For those of you who may be new to the Clinton Global Initiative, or CGI, I would love to take a moment to welcome you to this conversation and to our network of over 500 organizations working to advance response, recovery, and resiliency in the Caribbean region. The aim of our initiative is to simply bring people together to have meaningful conversations, to share best practices and knowledge, to really work together in developing specific, measurable, and actionable plans to address emerging issues, what we call commitments to action. So thanks so much again for joining us, and we look forward to your engagement. Before we get started on today's topic, I would love to quickly recap what we learned at our series kickoff call that took place on Monday, June 1st, which marks the first day of hurricane season. On the webinar, we learned that the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season is projected to surpass a 30-year average. And that projection, compounded by the impacts of COVID-19, really puts pressure and puts a strain on response organizations' capacities. We talked about how this will require even greater collaboration among organizations across the region and especially at the local level. So in today's discussion, we will be diving deeper into what this all means for food security. We'll hear from some of our amazing partners working directly with smallholders and their communities on various projects and in various different capacities. And we'll learn from them how they're adapting to the upcoming hurricane season and their efforts. If you have any questions for any of the speakers on today's call, please feel free to utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit those questions, and we'll circle back to them at the end of the discussion. So with that, we'd love to kick it off by first welcoming Regis Chapman from the World Food Program to share with us a brief overview and a situation update as it relates to food security. Mr. Chapman has 20 years of international development and humanitarian experience, including the past 15 years working with the United Nations World Food Program. He currently serves as the head of office for the WFP Barbados and is overseeing the emergency preparedness and response efforts in the Caribbean. Thank you so much for joining us, Regis.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I try to just very quickly set the stage for the discussion. The United Nations World Food Program supported the Caribbean community, or CARICOM, to conduct a COVID-19 food security and livelihoods impact survey. And that survey ran from the 1st to the 12th of April, which in most countries was the very early days of significant movement restrictions and border closures. The survey focused on the English-speaking Caribbean. What we found in that survey was that essentially COVID-19 has impacted people's access to markets. During the survey, over 37% of the respondents reported that there were times in the previous week when they were unable to access markets. We had countries like BVI, the British Virgin Islands, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and Grenada, where the highest rates were reported. And this was largely due to movement restrictions, closures of markets and grocery stores, people's concerns about the pandemic, and other factors. At the same time, nearly 60% of respondents reported that there were increases in food prices. Now, livelihoods are also being widely disrupted by the pandemic, with 73% of the respondents indicating that their ability to carry out their livelihoods was affected in the 2 weeks prior to the survey. The pandemic and restrictions immediately resulted in loss of income. Nearly half of the respondents reported that they experienced job loss or reduced income and revenue in the previous 2 weeks. Income losses were more prominent among younger people, 18 to 25, and with more marginalized sources of income, so daily and casual laborers, petty trade, business owners, etc. The survey asked people to look ahead and indicate how severe the impact is likely to be in their perception. And nearly half expected the impact to be moderate to severe or severe. People relying again on these more marginalized livelihoods or vulnerable livelihoods, such as casual labor and petty trade, people relying on remittances and support from others had a much more pessimistic outlook. Belize, Dominica, St. Lucia, and Grenada had the highest perceived levels of impact on livelihoods. And based on these results and the levels of poverty and extreme poverty by country, we were able to estimate the levels of food insecurity. We looked at both severe food insecurity and moderate food insecurity. Overall, we estimate that there's about 1.7 million people, which is around 24% of the population, that's food insecure, with 403,000 being severely food insecure. This is largely unprecedented given the countries that we're dealing with. While oftentimes you'll have one country that's heavily impacted by a hurricane or an earthquake or some other event, to have the whole region impacted in this way is something obviously quite different. And there's concerns as we look at that, not just within the Caribbean, but beyond. And one of the specific vulnerabilities from a food security perspective of the Caribbean is indicated by where the food comes from. 80% of food is imported and mostly from outside the region. There's actually only 2 other CARICOM countries that are in the list of top 10 importers, and that's within the Caribbean, and that's Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. Economies are very reliant on tourism and service industries, and even though the governments in the Caribbean with their quick action have effectively flattened the curve and have kept the medical aspects of COVID-19 at bay, the livelihood impacts are quite significant and are anticipated to have quite long-lasting impacts. And we're anticipating that this will, set back a generation of development and growth in the region. Now, obviously, as was just mentioned, we've entered the hurricane season just a couple of days ago, and we already have our 3rd named storm. So there's a forecast for an above normal hurricane season. And so obviously there's concerns about how, a response to a hurricane would take place in this context, and how those, the responding agencies like the World Food Program would be able to navigate, especially with the ongoing restrictions and movement. So we're very concerned with the current state of food insecurity in the Caribbean. Clearly there's challenges bringing the Caribbean to the global attention span in light of the fact that this is a global pandemic and food insecurity is worsening around the world. But again, we're very cognizant of the double risks that we now have with the hurricane season having begun. So the World Food Program and CARICOM will be doing a follow-up survey in the coming weeks. And we're anticipating that, again, because that first survey was done at the very early stages of lockdown, that we will have further deterioration in the food security situation to be reflected in this next survey as well. So I'll leave it at that and maybe pass it back over to Gauri.
Thank you so much, Regis, for providing us with that overview. A lot of foundational information I think is really crucial for us to understand before having a discussion about preparing for the upcoming hurricane season. And we look forward to learning about the findings in the follow-up survey to come. If folks have questions about anything that was mentioned, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A function. And again, we'll address those at the end of our discussion today. So now I would love to hand it over to Leo Gilling, who is our moderator for today's panel discussion. Leo, among a million things, is a small business owner, a social broadcaster, and a diaspora development advocate with over 30 years of experience dedicated to community service in Jamaica. He is the founder and the chair of the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force Action Network, which is a network of 15 sector-focused working groups addressing a multitude of issues, including agriculture and food insecurity. So thank you so much for joining, Leo. Of course, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. And I thank the staff of CGI for allowing me, especially you, Gauri, for allowing me to moderate this session. Thank you guys. Thank you team panelists for joining us. Thank you also. We have over 119 persons online who are here. I wanted to take this in 3 different steps. The first step is to go ahead and introduce our panelists. I'll read their short bios, and then we'll ask questions. I'll go down one question at a time. There are 3 questions for each panelist, and I'll just go down the line one by one and ask you what the questions that's here that we need to gather some information about. And then the third segment would be the Q&A. And so let's get going. Our next panelist is Yvonne Gomez. Yvonne Gomez, Human Resources Director at Supermercados Econo. Over 20 years experience in HR field, focusing on organization development, strategic planning and organization design, as well as in the operations aspect of businesses. Experience in the service, retailing, banking, pharmaceutical, and food industries in companies such as Pueblo International, Ecard Drugs, Doral Bank, Ethicon, and most recently at Supermercado Econo, Inc. Econo is the largest supermarket chain in Puerto Rico with 63 stores across the island. Go ahead and wave, Yvonne. Thank you so much. And then thirdly, and not last, well, last but not least, Nicola Phillips, Community Economic Development Specialist, Jamaica Diaspora Agriculture Task Force, a member of the JD-TAN. Nicola is a long-time member of the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force, Agriculture Task Force, in organic and permaculture training for our small conventional farmers. After living in the diaspora as a business owner in Philadelphia for over 22 decades, she returned home and co-founded the Source Farm Eco Village. The Source Farm and Eco Village, excuse me one second. The Source Farm and Eco Village was established to facilitate the need of Jamaicans in the diaspora to return home and to create a place of ecological stewardship and care. She has a master's in community economic development, award-winning chef she is, entrepreneur and community economic developer. Nicola Phillips is a woman on a mission to reconnect each of us to what ultimately sustains us, the soil and the ecosystem. Go ahead and wave, Nicola. Thank you so much.
I won't be able to wave, but I could say hello.
Okay, that's great. So we'll go straight into the questions. We'll take them one at a time. So we'll go to Yvonne for her question. Your first question, Yvonne. What alterations and precautions have you had to take to allow distribution centers and stores to continue operating during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, hi, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. We've had to take a lot of actions, different things that we've had to do, not only in our warehouse, but also in our stores, to make sure that we keep employees, we keep suppliers, and we keep consumers safe during this pandemic. And of course, since this is a brand new experience for all of us, we have all been working and learning together as we go. So we didn't have a manual that we could follow. So we've done several things that have been very important in allowing us to keep the contagions very low. We have less than 1% of all of our employees that have actually tested positive for COVID. So it's really a success story, given the amount of risk that is represented in our industry. We are considered part of a critical infrastructure, you know, for the maintaining society. We have a huge amount of risk in our stores because we receive people from everywhere. We have no idea if they've been taking care of themselves. So we defined very early on, we defined a protocol that contained actions to protect all of these different groups of people, employees, suppliers, and customers. So primarily, we kind of created an internal communications program to make sure that we created the awareness that, number one, we have to do this. Number two, this is long-term. This is not going to end when the governor you know, gets rid of the executive order and says every business can open now. This is long-term. This is a new normal, a new way of life. And then we needed to make sure that we promoted compliance with the conduct. So in terms of employees, first of all, we needed to make sure that we had PPE available for them. So all of our employees are required to wear masks. They are required to wear face shields depending on the job that they perform. We are taking temperatures for you know, our employees' temperatures every single day. We are disinfecting areas on a continuous basis. Definitely after we've had 10 positive results across all of our chain, and we have somewhat over 7,000 employees. So that's a very small percentage. But beyond the increased cleaning protocols, beyond the disinfecting protocols, after we have a positive result in a store, that same day or the day after, we again disinfect the whole areas. Okay. So we have been promoting you know, distancing. We have begun remote work. We had no one working from home. And in the warehouse, we got to about 80% of our office personnel started working remotely. So that was a big change for us. In terms of the suppliers, we said, you know, we appreciate your business, we appreciate you, but we do not want to see you. So we kind of said no visitors. We have been doing all of our meetings through Teams or Zoom or phone. And when the suppliers go to our stores to deliver anything, they have to abide by the rules that we have. They have to use their PPE, they have to wash their hands, and you know, they have to conduct themselves in a way that protects not only themselves but our employees and customers. In terms of our customers, it was very interesting because we had to work with the whole population. And first of all, it was limiting the amount of people that we have in the stores based on the space, the floor plan of the store. So we had to put somebody in the storefront saying to our customers, you cannot come in right now. We got to wait for somebody to come out. That was a big change. We started taking temperature for all of our customers. That was also a big change. We started disinfecting the grocery carts and the grocery baskets after each use. We are constantly reminding them through the audio system in the store, you know, don't socialize, avoid conglomerations of people. You know, you don't have all to go. If somebody is choosing a product, wait for that person to complete their choosing and then you go. So avoid being too close together.
Looks like you have a great plan that you didn't have a roadmap before. You didn't have any policy before. Now you do have one, right? That's pretty good.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yvonne. Okay, so let's move on to Nicola Phillips. Nicola, are you ready? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Nicola, how have your programs from prior years succeed in establishing sufficient food supply chains to support your community through the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, great question. So I wanted to actually give you a little bit of background of the program itself. So we have a program called Jamaica Sustainable Farm Enterprise Program, and this is working with small farmers to produce organically grown food or certified organic food. So for us, this pandemic has been obviously an eye-opening experience, but it's also attracted a lot of people because everybody was talking about boosting your immune system. So now we were the people on island who had all the clean food. And so we actually had increased numbers of people coming to our farmers market to access those foods. So we were able to do a bunch of different commercials so that people know that we were there. So we had more people coming. Also, the other thing, it allowed us to diversify, not just about going to the farmers market, but we were able to now start a pickup system and also delivery system, because we have some people that are elderly. We didn't want them to be able to come out, and so we were able to create that opportunity for them. So for us, it's been, you know, they say in everything there's good, there's also bad. It has allowed us to more people to open their eyes to the kinds of foods that they were getting, and be able to now access more healthier foods that were not grown necessarily with all the chemicals and pesticides because they were worried about the immune system. So for us, it's been a step in the right direction. And we're also having more people interested in joining organic farming or learning more about permaculture, or actually wanting to do more training around backyard farming or how they can make a conversion to an organic system. So it's been a wonderful experience in that sense, seeing people making that shift.
We had a lot of farmers there that were pretty much losing their crops. They weren't making sale. Was that the same thing for Source Farm? Did you have a huge loss there too?
No, we didn't. I mean, we have been working, we kind of know what our numbers were. So we actually had to increase our production because, you know, we had a certain number we knew that would come to the farmer's market, or we would do certain deliveries to certain supermarkets. But because of the pandemic, more people were interested in cleaner food. So our farmers have had to step up our game. What you did find is that there were a lot of various box schemes being done because there was a lot of produce that would go into the hotel that didn't have a place anymore.
All right.
And trying to find other placement for that. But it's been, for us, we've had to step up our production.
That's great to hear. At least we have some success there. Yvonne, thank you so much. That was a great answer, by the way. Let's go to question number 2 for you. Given the lesson learned from Hurricane Irma and also Hurricane Maria, COVID-19 also, among other challenges that we're facing, when creating a preparedness plan, what risks should we consider? And what are some of the specific ways to mitigate some of those risks in planning our efforts? You gotta unmute. There you go.
Okay. Well, this year presents a really interesting challenge as we are facing, you know, here in Puerto Rico, we are just in the midst of earthquakes, which thankfully are less strong and less frequent, but they're still going on, especially on the southern part of the island. We have the pandemic, we have the hurricane season, we have the electric power company that has announced selective power outages to be able to meet demand. And we have water rationing because it's not raining enough. So we definitely, you know, the way that we manage emergencies is definitely critical. So we learned a lot from Maria. I think that, you know, we had experience obviously with hurricanes, but Maria was just like something else. So 2 big issues that we learned. Number 1 is communications is essential. So we needed to have contingencies for our contingencies. So that was really important. The other very important part is the importance of collaboration and working together. So I think that every crisis allows us to really get something positive out of it. And one of the things that was really positive that we saw out of Maria was that borders were crossed, competitors became, you know, work together, and everybody was focused on just get the need met and not on all of these petty things that we usually pay attention to. So for us, we do several things. Here in the warehouse, we serve our 63 stores across the island. So we focus on our number one priority is to open operations. So how do we stabilize the operations here in the warehouse? From this warehouse, we service probably about 40% of what gets sold in the stores. And in our stores account for almost 50% of the food industry in Puerto Rico. So almost half of the population depends on our stores to get their food. So it's very critical that we act quickly and we can restore operations as quickly as possible. So every one of our departments here in the warehouse prepares a plan, and we kind of divide it into what needs to happen before a hurricane comes in. So when the season begins, or as soon as we know that there is a storm coming our way, what needs to happen during the storm and what needs to happen after the storm. So we kind of integrate all of that. And if I'm going to summarize, key items that need to be considered, number one would be the people. Without our employees, we can't do anything. So we do make sure that we help employees take care of their homes and their family aspects so that they can focus on coming to work. We take care of food. We allow them to purchase, products here, which we don't usually do. We provided them with gasoline for their cars. We provided transportation. We provided ATM facilities. So all of those things that we can do to help them reduce their anxiety and be able to focus on doing what needs to be done here in the office, right? Second point, very important, is energy. So here we do have power generators that can supply all of our needs in our facility. But what we learned with Maria is that our power generators fail.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, okay. And beyond that, these are systems that are not really designed to operate 24/7 for an extended period of time. So we now have a contingency for our generators and a contract with the supplier that in case, of course, we get priority in terms of repairs and maintenance for the generator that we're renting out that will be here in July.
So a contingency for a contingency.
Absolutely. It's a contingency for the contingency, and sometimes even a plan whatever we need.
Okay.
So that is really, energy needs is really important. One of the things that we had not planned was, for example, stockpiling inventory for filters and oils and just the parts that are needed to maintain and to repair the generators. And we had all of our stores running on generators. And of course, in a supermarket, you have a ton of refrigerator systems going on. So that was a very important need. Beyond that, we get into the inventory, which is pretty much what we do. So that is very important for us to make sure that we had secured the supply of inventory so that we may provide that inventory to our stores. But before getting into the inventory of the stores, we do stockpile inventory of, for example, diesel. We stockpile, we have 6,000 gallons of gasoline that we use for our employees and our stores. We stockpile water that we can use for the operation. So not like cases of water that we sell for the customers, but water to use so that we can operate. And this year we have some benefits above what we had during Maria. I think the maritime transportation learned a lot with Maria. They have increased capacity. So right now we have the ability to manage 500 extra containers a week just in the regular shipments or the regular shipments that each of them manages. Usually we have 10 shipments coming into the island. They have the capacity to build it up to 18, which is what they were doing when Maria came along. So that will allow us to have more inventory coming in to the island on a constant basis. So that's definitely going to help. And of course, FEMA now has inventory of critical material and equipment here on the island, which when Maria happened, we had to wait until all of that came in.
Well, that's a good thing, because FEMA is not, I don't think FEMA is on the other island, so you're kind of lucky.
So we have that benefit. And I know, when you compare us to the other islands, Puerto Rico is on a better
absolutely
managed. And that's the point that I wanted to highlight well, is the communications part, because communications became essential. We had stores that had no access to them for weeks. So right now, you talk about contingency of the contingency. We have contingencies for data communications, for voice communications. We've actually negotiated and gotten in with Homeland Security so that we have priority access to cell lines, landlines, and priority access for any repairs that our communication systems may need. And that is going to make a huge difference in terms of what we can and we cannot do.
Can I suggest that you bring some walkie-talkies, a lot of walkie-talkies too?
We have walkie-talkies.
Okay.
We have satellite phones, which we purchased after Maria. And so, yeah, we'll use like smoke signals if they can. If they can help us get in touch with our stores. That's very important.
Great. All right, Yvonne, thank you so much for the answers there. Great. I mean, you're giving us so much information here, and it's great to have this, because we can stockpile on your policies.
Sure.
All right, Nicola Phillips, thank you so much. It's your time again. Nicola, how is the Seed to Market initiative supporting disaster preparedness, and how can we promote preparedness through these types of programs at the community level?
Okay, great. One of the things I wanted, before we kind of get into that question,
yes,
I wanted to kind of talk about the fact of how a lot of the islands are kind of situated.
Yes.
So in order, we've been kind of growing food, kind of I would say a traditional way, where it was kind of grown for extraction to be exported. But when I've been, over the last couple of years, I've been looking at increasing a production for our organic farmers. And what I've noticed is that we needed to change the way that we're doing business in terms of the way that we're growing, and to go to a more regenerative system. So we're not so much looking at the outside bringing food in, but how can we kind of shelter in place and have food available? And so in addressing the question in terms of there's a program that we're working with the task force collaboratively, and also Trees that Feed, where we're going to be planting more fruit trees. But also planting more fruit trees is one thing, because most farmers, they don't want to wait, the 3-4 years to wait for that particular tree to grow. But we are now doing a program where it's more regenerative, and also planting other cash crops around it, so they can be making money in the same time that they're actually waiting for the trees to grow. So we're going to be working on a program highlighting breadfruit as one of the main staples. And that's important for us, because we can then obviously make it into flour and all these other products, and actually have that on island that we can depend on. So what I'm hoping to do is for us to start to look across the island in terms of our farming practices, that when there is a hurricane that's coming, we were able to visit Puerto Rico and look at farms that were using permaculture and using regenerative systems, and they were able to bounce back quicker than the conventional farms. And so if we start to tweak and try to educate other farmers around various methodology, then you'd have a quicker system, because it would be designed knowing that every year our region gets, we get some kind of tropical storm, or we're getting some kind of hurricane, but how do we bounce back? And how do we design a system that when there is storms coming and all that fruit fall, is there a place to process it? How do we utilize all that fruit? Or how do we even design each year that we put certain amount of food aside, whether it's being dried or it's canned or it's frozen, to be able to put aside to make sure that we're able to help ourselves, not waiting for someone else to kind of rush in all the time and help. And that is because we have to design that way. We have to design a system around that. So in answering your question, by us working with the farmers, we have had Florida State come in and they did mapping of our farms and actually helping us, each of our farmers, to do a plan, a disaster preparedness plan. And you'd ask out there, how many farmers actually have a disaster preparedness plan? And most farmers don't, because they're mostly thinking, maybe they think about a fire, but the whole system and what would happen if any of these incidents happen. So we're actually going to be working with each farmer and looking at their land and how do we design for hurricane, how do we design for fire, how do we design to work with the COVID? And then putting those systems in place so that when we do have something, because we're in this region that it will happen, a hurricane or earthquake, that we've already thought about some things and we put some things aside to be able to mitigate against those things. So the program with the Seed to Market program, it will be used to put some of those things in place, to work with the farmers so they understand how to lay out their land. We have a lot of hillsides. How do you terrace and make sure if you get a lot of rain, to make sure it flows off the land and don't, obviously blow down everything. And how do you deal with those incidences that are going to come with a hurricane or with a tropical storm or even with an earthquake? And you can, if you design your system to mitigate against those things. So with the program that we're going to be working with the task force, we're going to be working with the farmers to make sure that they have those things put in place and they actually design their farms to be able to know that every year there might be some incident that they may have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. I really like that because this could be easily spread if we develop the relationship with the other, because I'm sure the same kind of issues that Jamaica has, Nicola, where you are, the same kind of issues that probably Barbados and Guyana and the other countries would have. And if we could get this same package type of project across to these other countries, it would seem like a great place for us to start with food security and in increasing food security in the region.
Can I just say one more thing before you go on? We're also able to go to Puerto Rico and see one of the things that they did was created brigades. So when there was a storm, there were people that were already trained up and knew about permaculture, knew about how to use a chainsaw and how to use different tools. So they would actually travel from farm to farm and they spend a week and help those farmers get back, get the help they need to move things or to replant and to start seeds and that kind of stuff. And this is the same thing that we're going to be taking that example in Jamaica to be able to start to create a group of young men that know how to use a chainsaw and know how to start seeds and know how to create swales and contours.
Yes.
And it's very important. So we need, as you're saying, a network. Since we're the ones that are constantly in the Caribbean get hit, we need to communicate more within each island, especially around agriculture, not just about exports, but what else are we doing on our islands to be able to help our farmers to withstand these storms.
You did speak of the storage, whether it's frozen or dried. That's key because we lose a lot of breadfruit every year to winds and rain, and we gotta find a way how to capture that because it's a good product. Thank you so much, Nicola. Let's go back to Yvonne. Thank you, Yvonne. Here's a question for you. What shortages are you already experiencing? I meant to ask you that while you were talking. What shortages are you already experiencing, and how can farmers and private sector partners tailor their efforts to supply the goods that will be needed before, during, and after a disaster? That's a very key question for you, Yvonne.
Yes, very important, and two kind of areas. First of all, we are seeing a reduced availability of some products. I am unmuted. Okay. We are seeing a reduced availability of some products, especially in your proteins, your beef, pork, chicken. We're seeing reduced availability in, for example, ice cream. We haven't even begun the real summer months, but demand has increased so high since the pandemic started that the manufacturing plants just don't have the capability to supply the volume needed. So we are seeing a reduced availability in flour and flour derivatives. So people are buying pancake mixes and cake mixes like crazy. They're home, so they're baking. Another category is your processed meats. And that one especially is, of course, one of the critical categories going into the hurricane session. So this reduced availability doesn't mean that there are no products on the shelves. It just means that you will probably, number one, not find so many sales on these categories because we do not have the minimum quantity requirements to be able to carry a sale or carry a promotion in one of the items in these categories. And another thing that you may find is when you go to the store, you will probably not find as much variety as you're used to, or you may not find the packaging that you're used to. So if a product, we have 3 different packagings, right now maybe we have 1. If you're used to seeing 6 brands of something, well, right now maybe you have 2 or 3. So that is the impact to the consumer in terms of what we're seeing in reduced availability. In terms of farmers and small business, Econo has a very strong commitment to working with small businesses and farmers. And I don't think a lot of people realize that is, for us, it's not just a good business practice, it's who we are. Econo is a conglomerate of 28 different owners. So we are what it's called a voluntary chain. So we have 28 different small businesses or family-owned businesses that make up the Econo chain. So it's very much in their blood, and it's very much in our owners' DNA. It's who we are to help out those smaller ones trying to make their way in the markets. So we have several programs going on, and right now Econo purchases on an annual basis about $100 million in local products. Now that includes the whole gamut of local products. So that's your produce, your dairy, your proteins, your coffee, everything done locally that we purchase comes up to about 100 million a year. And in terms of produce directly, specifically talking about what we do with farmers, we have increased local purchases by 30% versus last year. And last year had doubled the year before. So our trend is on very much upward trend. This has allowed us to substitute importations, which is something that we are very proud of. So right now, none of our stores carry pineapple that is not locally produced. None of our stores carry pumpkins that is not locally produced. We have cucumbers that are completely produced in Puerto Rico. Watermelon is another product that is completely produced in Puerto Rico. Last year, I could say that for peppers, but this year there have been some issues with the crops, and we have had to supplement peppers from importation. But we are very, very proud to be able to honor the commitments that we've made with the local farmer. We design an app for our local farmers. It is called Mercado Econo. This is an app that right now we have over 250 local farmers registered. And this app allows the local farmer to showcase their product, negotiate the price, set up the transaction and complete the transaction and get paid without ever leaving their farm. So
that's great to hear.
Yeah,
you gotta share that. You gotta share that with the other islands, Yvonne. Come on.
That would be good. Yeah, that would be good. We are very proud of what we've been able to do with Mercado Econo and the local farmers, and we have agreements with farmers that we will purchase 100% of your product.
How did the pandemic, the last 3 months, affect your relationships with the farmers? How did that?
Well, when we do this business through Mercado Econo, there's no need for direct contact. No need for direct contact. You do that all through the app. So it is a very good tool, especially for this time, you know, in that social distancing is what we need to do. This is one tool that definitely allows you to continue your business and you know, not have to leave your farm, not have to get yourself in trouble. And year to date, we have sold through Mercado Econo, just through the app. Year to date, we've sold over $1.2 million, and that is among the 250 local farmers, you know, that are registered there. So that is really good. And one thing that we're doing different this year that we did not have when Maria hit, we have identified and we have come to agreements with 10 farms who are suppliers of ours. And we have all of their contact information, all of their key information. And the agreement is that as soon as a hurricane comes and goes, we can contact that farm and figure out the extent of their damages. We can figure out the impact to their crops and the impact to availability. So that allows us to do two things. We can certainly cooperate and collaborate with them in terms of getting their reconstruction going on, and you know, how do they get up back on their feet again quicker. But it gives us the opportunity as a business, and thinking about our consumers, it tells us immediately we need to look for other sources of this particular product because the local supply is just not going to be there.
All right, thank you so much, Yvonne. I just real quickly, Nicola, there is a question that's kind of off the chart, what I have in front of me, but I have to ask this question. I'm sure you can answer it. Jamaica depends heavily, as most of the other Caribbean islands, on the farm products going into some of the hotels or the tourist industry. I'm so sorry. The tourist industry, depend on the tourist industry. How has that the farming products affected by the tourist trade going pretty much south right now?
Well, I mean, it has been a big impact, and I'm actually really, really concerned about it. Even though they are not growing, they are still farmers. And what I'm worried about, they actually had to try to put a lot of the products into the local market.
We're losing you. Just repeat what you just said, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can, yes.
Okay, great. So I was saying I was really concerned about the farming, the agriculture sector, even if it's not organically grown. The farmers were actually having many challenges because they were geared, a number of them were geared to sell into the hotel system. And since that was closed, a lot of them had to, they were either getting rid of product or they had to reduce the price substantially just to be able to move the product. And that is going to make it very difficult for them to be able to buy seeds again and to even bring back their employees to start up again. And so that is we're going to have a large effect on us in the next couple of months. So we're waiting to see what's happening.
All right. You see, is that a slow comeback or a big comeback? How is that going to, we're going to have to watch it coming for the next year, 2 years? How is that going to go?
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be it's going to be a big impact on us. But hopefully what it will do is to have us to evaluate how we are designing our systems so we don't put all our eggs in one basket. Okay. The other thing too is to for Jamaica to really look at creating more value-added products. So if, for instance, you have a situation where you don't have the sale in a raw produce, that you can then put that into a different, you could, either freeze it or you could do something else with it. And I think because we've been kind of geared ourselves to be producers of raw materials, we have not really stepped up our game in terms of any value-added products. And just so you know, we get a lot of requests globally, not just from the US, but from Canada, from different places and also even across the Caribbean. But we ourselves have not really done a lot of that work. We have not put the equipment and the industry in place to be able to scale up so that we would have food that would be available to ship if there's a issue, or things that can hold on a shelf. And that's something I think we have to look a little bit more into, so we don't just produce raw materials.
Thank you, Nicola. We are at close to the end of our 1 hour. Thank you both for sharing your expertise and your plans and your hopes and your dreams for the future of your countries and the region. Thank you. And I'll turn this over now to Gauri Patel.
Thank you so much, Leo, and thank you to all the panelists for sharing and providing us such a thought-provoking conversation and some specific examples in terms of innovative thinking, not just to respond to the current situation, but really to create long-term resiliency in the region. So we just have a few minutes left for questions, so we can bring all of our panelists back. Our first question goes out to Regis. Our participants would love to know what you expect to learn from your upcoming survey and what the scope will be for that survey. So if you don't mind digging into that piece a little bit further, would be really appreciated.
Okay, sure. I mean, the survey will essentially will replicate the first round of the surveys. And what we're trying to do is look at tracking changes over time. So as I mentioned, the first round of the survey was done just at the onset of the main movement restrictions throughout the English-speaking Caribbean. And we saw quite a significant impact on livelihoods, on income sources, et cetera. So the idea is to sort of track things over time and see how that's changing. What we're doing with this information, so CARICOM is using it within the framework of their CARICOM Agri-Food COVID-19 action plan that has been developed. And we're also sharing it with governments, and there's a series of recommendations around strengthening food systems, but also ensuring that the poorest of the poor and the most marginalized have access to social assistance and other programs.
Great, thank you so much. Another question we have for Nicola: what COVID precautions have you put in place at the farmers markets that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, actually, we did. We have the social distancing. We've started the market a little bit earlier, so people will be able to, we have to line up, so give them more chance to be able to come to the market. We've actually created the pickup, so people don't even have to really, they could just drive up and we could just, they'd pre-order, and we'd just give them their items, so they don't have to, stand in a line and contaminate folks. We've actually had to, obviously we reduced the amount of people that are going into the market. And we were really surprised. We thought more people would actually want to do more pickup, but people really do want to see what their produce is and want to, pick them, to point and pick them up. With the vendors, what we've done is to create more bagging for them, so they have a pound of this and a pound of that, so they can not have to touch the produce, so they can quickly, easily pick those bags up. And we've, doing the temperature checks and just really trying to encourage people not to, because the markets tend to always want to be social, but for them to just get their produce and get going, because no one else can come into the market until they leave. So we've been really doing that for the last, we've never stopped having a market, and people were wondering what was going to happen, but definitely the fact that you need to boost your immune system, we are the ones that are creating those kinds of food, we just kept going. And anybody that needed a specific delivery order because they weren't able to get out, we were also doing that, and also protecting our drivers as they would go to deliver the products. But it really has worked really well. And as I said before, we are just seeing increasing numbers of people coming through once they've found out about the market that we're actually creating clean, healthy food for folks.
Great, thanks so much. And it looks like that we're at time, and I would just like to respect everyone's time today. And I will close just by saying thank you so much for everyone that's engaged with us today. We are just really grateful to be able to come together and have this discussion. So thank you so much. There's a lot of outstanding questions that I'm seeing, and so we will take those and reach out to you to get them answered and to connect you with the folks on today's call. So please feel free to reach out with any of those or just to learn more about us and our program. So we hope to see everyone at our next webinar, which is going to take place on Friday, June 5th at 2 p.m. And we will be tackling the topic of healthcare in the face of hurricanes and COVID-19. And so if you are not already registered, again, please reach out and our team would be happy to add you. And just a huge thank you once again, and I hope everyone has a great day.